After making his greatest film to date, Oliver Stone finally had the clout that he needed to pull off a massive project which returned to the Vietnam War, but from the most unexamined perspective of all. Heaven and Earth deals with a young Vietnamese woman named Lê Ly, whose true story led her across Vietnam all the way to the United States and eventually back to the land she had left behind. Just like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July, Heaven and Earth deals with the loss of innocence in times of war. The film opens up with Lê Ly in her home village, and we watch as the changes in the outside world rock the foundations of her life. The outside world comes crashing into her little sanctuary in the form of first the communists, then the foreign powers coming to fight the communists. Lê Ly finishes growing up in a place of fear and suspicion, and her brothers are taken to serve with the Viet Cong. She herself is accused of being a spy by both sides. In scenes that are very disturbing to watch, the South Vietnamese torture her, along with a group of other girls suspected of espionage, and after bribery secures her release, 2 Viet Cong soldiers accuse her of betraying them and rape her. Lê Ly must also watch her village of peace turn into a war zone for a war that the villagers didn't want. Her parents send her south to Saigon, where she works as a servant in a wealthy man's household. She is seduced by the wealthy owner of the home and begets him a child out of wedlock. However, the man's wife ensures her immediate dismissal, forcing her to scrounge for work in a city dominated by the presence of American troops. She eventually meets such an American, played by Tommy Lee Jones, who genuinely falls in love with her, gives her 2 more children, and wants to take her out of this war-torn region. We then follow Lê Ly discovering the American way of life and her own determination to survive and raise her 3 children properly. Rarely has a film been made that looks at the Vietnamese War from the point of view of the civilians, and the result is fascinating. Both the Viet Cong and the Americans committed acts of barbarity, and it was the non-military people that suffered the most. I'm sure most of us had figured that out by now, but it's still fascinating to actually see a movie dedicated to showing this side of history. Lê Ly is played by Hiep Thi Lê, a beautiful young Vietnamese woman who had no acting experience prior to this film. Considering how she completely carries this film in the lead role is a monument to her talent. It's the best female performance that I've ever seen in an Oliver Stone movie. Though we also get another brilliant performance from Joan Chen, who plays Lê Ly's mother. Her father is played by Hang Yes Nyor, another prominent Asian actor. Considering Stone's having fought in the Vietnam War, his later adoption of Buddhism, and his eventual taking of an Asian spouse, he's especially fascinated by this woman's story, and he isn't afraid to show the truths of war and culture differences. The early scenes in the United States look like a nightmarish parody out of a cartoon or a comic book. Looking at Western civilization through the eyes of this young foreigner, we're almost as surprised as she is by the sheer glut and plenty that surrounds her. Now, some people will probably write this movie off as being too simple and too biased in depicting the evil gluttony of American capitalism as opposed to the perfect and simple lifestyle of the Vietnamese villagers. But the point is, we're seeing these events and these worlds from the eyes of a young Vietnamese woman whose home and culture were both attacked by people that she had never provoked in her life, and she is forced to adapt in an effort to survive. There are many instances where the strength of her spirit reveal how noble and enduring she can be, and in the most emotional moment of the film, she has a heartfelt conversation over the telephone with a character whose own emotional scars have driven him to his breaking point. And one last bit of good in him causes him to feel ashamed in the face of Lê Ly's words and her actions, and he can only weep as he listens to her. Lê Ly's story is inspiring and heroic, not just because she's a fish out of water, but because she's an ordinary woman whose naivety quickly gives way to a determination and will to live a good life and be a responsible parent to her 3 children. She's able to thrive in strange environments while maintaining her values. Heaven and Earth is one of the most beautiful looking of Stone's movies, which is saying something, I imagine, and the soundtrack by Kitaro adds to the atmosphere as well. Dedicated to his mother, Heaven and Earth is Stone's only film that solely revolves around a female protagonist, and he does an exceptionally good job honoring this woman's achievements. Sadly, the film was Stone's biggest box office flop to date. Not many people were interested in this kind of story, and few critics thought highly of it compared to his first Vietnam War movies. Stone then decided to make a smaller film that would appeal to more audiences. And it turned out to be the most violent and controversial of Stone's movies. But of course, that's another review.